Bratty Stepson destroyed all the gifts we bought him for Christmas, then tried to blame my daughter because he said she shouldn't get better presents. So I took every device and privilege away from him and only replaced my daughter's gifts. But now my husband claims I'm being unfair. I, 38M, have a daughter, Addison, 13F, from my previous marriage. My wife, now husband, 40M, has a son, Joel, 11M. We've been together 5 years, married for 2, and from day one, that kid has been a walking tornado of "my mom lets me do whatever I want" energy. It's been manageable at times, annoying at others, but what happened this Christmas was on a completely different level. For context, we run our house pretty evenly. Or at least that's what I thought. I buy what we both agree on. We keep the budgets the same for both kids. We try not to play favorites, and all of that. Addison's a quiet kid, keeps to herself, does well in school, very responsible. Joel is the opposite. Loud, impulsive, competitive over nothing, talks down to Addison like it's a sport, and it's not sibling teasing, it's mean, straight up mean. But whenever I try to address it, my husband acts like Joel's just passionate or high energy. That's his excuse for everything. If the kid slammed a door so hard it fell off the frame, he'd probably say Joel was expressing himself. Anyway, Christmas. We planned it early. Addison had a short wish list, mostly art supplies, a hoodie from a brand she saved screenshots for, a book series she likes. Simple stuff. Joel had this ridiculous list that looked like he copied every trending item off YouTube and pasted it into a note. Half the stuff was over our budget. I told him straight up we couldn't get everything, and he went into this whole dramatic meltdown about how it's not fair and Addison gets everything she wants, which isn't true, because she literally asks for normal kid things instead of whatever these TikTok toy influencers are shoving at boys his age. My husband kept telling me, "It's okay, we'll work it out," but I found out later he'd been secretly adding extra things to Joel's list and ordering them because he didn't want him disappointed. Meanwhile, he didn't add a single extra thing for Addison, not one. We had an argument about that, but he brushed it off like I was blowing it out of proportion. He said, "They're kids, they won't compare." Which is insane because Joel compares everything. If Addison gets a cookie with 2 chocolate chips more than his, he acts like we've committed a crime. Fast forward to about a week before Christmas. I go to get something from our closet, the walk-in, where we hide the gifts and everything is trashed. Not just opened, not just peeked at. I'm talking ripped boxes, smashed electronics, clothes with the tags torn off and then cut up, wrapping paper shredded everywhere. Addison's art set had water spilled all over it. The book set was ripped from the spine. The hoodie was literally cut through with something sharp. Joel's gifts were messed with too, but not destroyed in the same way, like he did just enough damage so it didn't look like he only targeted Addison's gifts. And here's the thing, no one else could have done it. Addison was at a sleepover, my husband was at work, I was running errands. Only Joel was home, and his door was open when I came in. The kid tried to act shocked when I called him out, but he wouldn't even make eye contact. He tried to say, maybe Addison came home early. And that pissed me off because Addison is the type of kid who organizes her school binder for fun. She doesn't destroy her own things, let alone Christmas gifts. I asked him why he did it. That's when he gave the most smug explanation I've ever heard from a kid. He said, "She shouldn't get better presents than me." Just like that. No emotion, no embarrassment. Like that was some reasonable explanation. Then he added, "Dad will just buy me new ones anyway." That's when my husband came in, and before I could even explain what happened, Joel starts fake crying, blaming Addison again, who wasn't even physically present in the house. My husband immediately went into "he's just a kid" mode. He didn't even look at the destroyed gifts before trying to calm Joel down like he was the victim. I was the one holding Addison's soaked art set in my hands. I was the one who found the screwdriver from Joel's room sitting next to the pile of destroyed stuff. I was the one who found one of the video games literally in the toilet. But sure, it must have been the quiet 13-year-old girl who gets nervous ordering food at a restaurant. I finally told my husband to stop babying him and look at the mess. He acted shocked for about 2 seconds, then said we shouldn't jump to punishment and that it's Christmas. I said I didn't care what day it was. If a kid destroys property, he faces consequences. So I took every single device from Joel's room. The tablet, the gaming console, the handheld thing his mom bought him, even the TV remote. I told him no screens, no Christmas gifts, and his allowance for the next few months would go toward replacing what he destroyed. My husband immediately said I was being too harsh. I said I didn't care. the kid destroyed over $600 worth of gifts because he didn't like that Addison had a hoodie he didn't. I replaced Addison's gifts because why should she suffer for something she didn't do? I didn't replace Joel's, not one thing. My husband says that makes me punitive and biased. I said, I'm not biased. His son is destructive and manipulative, and I'm done pretending it's normal behavior. Since then, there's been tension non-stop. Joel keeps glaring at Addison like she's the reason he got punished. Addison's been nervous just being in the same room as him. Meanwhile, my husband has started accusing me of favoring my daughter and trying to punish Joel for not being perfect. I'm not punishing him for not being perfect. I'm punishing him for trashing an entire closet of property and then lying about it. But now my husband is acting like I should replace Joel's gifts too. To be fair, even though he already said he'd buy him new things. So apparently we're supposed to reward destruction now. Was I actually wrong for not replacing Joel's gifts? Because I really don't see how I was. Update 1. The morning after the whole destruction incident, my husband decided he was going to smooth things over, which in his language means undoing everything I put in place. I walked into the living room and found my stepson stretched out on the couch like he owned the place, holding the same tablet I took away the night before. He acted like he didn't even see me, like I was some random stranger walking through my own house. My husband was standing there pretending to look busy with some cables, and the second he spotted me, he had that guilty look he gets when he's caught trying to be the fun dad. I took the tablet right back. No yelling, no dramatic scene. I just held out my hand, waited for him to hand it over, and walked away with it. He huffed and rolled his eyes like this was the worst injustice he'd ever suffered. My husband started with the usual half-hearted excuses about how the kid needed something to distract himself and how taking away too much at once wasn't productive. I shut that down fast. I don't know what world my husband lives in where smashing hundreds of dollars worth of gifts and trying to frame a child counts as something that needs gentle encouragement and comforting. My daughter, on the other hand, stayed out of the main rooms. I realized I hadn't seen her sit on the couch in days. She's quiet, but she's never been scared to just exist in her own home. When she finally talked to me, she told me she didn't want to be around him because every time they crossed paths, he'd make some comment about how things were going to change soon, or how dad said she thinks she's better than everyone. None of this surprised me at that point, but hearing it from her hit different. She's a good kid, doesn't stir the pot, doesn't bother anyone. She just keeps to herself and tries to stay out of trouble, and he goes out of his way to tear her down. I started realizing this wasn't some one-off tantrum. This was a pattern, probably going on longer than I knew. I asked her if anything else happened before Christmas that she didn't tell me about. She didn't want to, but eventually she mentioned a few things. Stuff missing from her room, rude comments at school. Apparently he once took her headphones and told her she didn't deserve nice things. And I remembered when her teacher emailed earlier this year about some posts in a kids group chat, but back then it was framed like kids being kids. Now I'm not so sure. When I brought all this up to my husband, he brushed it off again. Normal sibling stuff. Just kids fighting. A phase. That was his whole stance. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there watching my daughter shrink into herself in her own house while his son struts around like he's untouchable because dad will always swoop in and make sure nothing sticks. My husband and I argued, not even a big blowout one. Just that same repetitive loop we always fall into where he insists I'm too strict, too harsh, too intense, while he keeps enabling behavior that would get most kids grounded for a month. He said I was turning this into a bigger deal than it needed to be. I pointed out that his kid literally destroyed every gift we bought, tried to blame someone who wasn't even home, and then bragged that he'd get everything replaced anyway. Somehow my husband still didn't see the problem. Then the twist came from a family member I didn't expect. His sister. She called me later that day, probably because she got wind of the fight. She was calm, almost too calm, and asked if I knew what her nephew had been saying at her house. I didn't. She explained that he came over after all this happened and basically bragged about what he did. Not ashamed, not scared, just proud of himself. She sent me a voice note because she figured I wouldn't believe it otherwise. And honestly, hearing him talk like that, laughing about ruining Christmas, talking like he outsmarted everyone, acting like my daughter got what she deserved, it confirmed everything I'd been thinking. My husband hasn't heard the recording yet. He keeps insisting his son didn't understand what he was doing. But after hearing that, no. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he expected to get rewarded for it. The rest of the day was tense. My husband moped around like I'd kicked his childhood dog. My stepson acted like losing his devices was some human rights violation. and my daughter spent Christmas Eve holed up in her room because she said being out in the living room felt uncomfortable with how he kept glaring at her. By the end of the night, I started thinking about whether I should just separate Christmas into 2 different days, one for each kid, just so my daughter could enjoy something without being attacked for existing. I never thought I'd be considering that, but at this point, nothing feels off the table. This house is becoming a pressure cooker, and every time I try to fix something, my husband undoes it out of fear of upsetting his son. If anything, it's making his son worse. I'm trying not to make decisions out of pure anger, but I can feel the resentment building. And I don't want my daughter living in a house where she's treated like the problem because my husband refuses to admit he's raising an entitled kid. That's where things stand now. Update 2. The morning after the voice note situation, I pulled everyone into the living room because I was tired of the whispering, the triangulating, the constant side comments from both of them. I laid everything out as plainly as I could, because at that point I felt like I was talking to 2 people who kept pretending they didn't understand basic consequences. I said what the rules were, what was sticking, and that nothing was changing just because they didn't like it. I didn't raise my voice or anything, but the second it became clear I wasn't backing down, his kid went into full meltdown mode. Not crying, not upset, just full destruction again. Knocked a lamp off the side table hard enough to crack the shade and then started yelling like he was the injured party. I sent him to his room before he could break anything else. My husband tried giving me that "you're being too harsh" look again, but I didn't entertain it. I'm done being the only one reacting to actual behavior while he treats everything like some minor misunderstanding. Every time his son does something, it's like my husband's brain shuts off and all he can see is a poor misunderstood baby instead of an 11-year-old who knows exactly what he's doing. After things calmed down a bit, my daughter came to me and told me something she should have told me months ago, but I completely get why she didn't want to. She said his kid threatened to break her violin, not just as a heat-of-the-moment insult, but repeatedly. She said he actually dented the case once and told her it was a warning. I didn't even know what to say. She also told me he's been going around telling her she's not real family because dad says so. She said it so quiet, I almost missed it. And the second she finished, my husband immediately insisted he never said that. But the way he reacted made me even more suspicious. Like, the tone wasn't defensive because he was falsely accused, it was more like he didn't expect to be called out. That bothered me enough that I checked his phone later. I don't usually go through people's stuff, but after everything this week I didn't even feel guilty. And sure enough, full conversations with his ex. Not normal co-parenting stuff, not updates about school or pickups, just the 2 of them going back and forth trashing my daughter. Stuff like calling her spoiled or acting like she's manipulating me, even implying she's trying to act better than their son. Reading it was sickening. It explains so much, not just why his kid treats her like competition, but why he never corrects him. They've basically built this little echo chamber where anything my daughter does is some kind of threat. What really ticked me off was seeing how his ex encouraged it. Stuff like telling my husband not to let my daughter win or saying their son deserves more. None of it made sense except through the lens of 2 adults projecting their own bitterness onto an 11-year-old who can barely regulate his emotions as it is, and then they wonder why he acts the way he does. When I confronted my husband about it, he immediately pulled the whole "I was just venting" thing. Like that magically makes it okay. He tried to act like I was reading too much into it, but he couldn't explain half the comments. He kept insisting nothing he ever said would make his son act like that. But the second he raised his voice at me, his kid came running out and practically confirmed it by shouting that he knows I only care about my daughter because his dad said so. He wasn't lying. You could tell he meant it. You don't get that level of confidence unless an adult planted it in your head. I'm not usually speechless, but that honestly left me blank for a minute. It was like everything finally clicked. I've been blaming the kid for so long that I didn't realize how much of his attitude was learned, not spontaneous. No wonder every time I tried to correct something, my husband swooped in like I was out of line. No wonder the kid acts like there are 2 different rule books in this house, because there are. After that, I told my husband he had 2 choices. Either he backs me up on actual consequences and stops feeding this "my kid versus your kid" mess, or he takes his son to his mother's for a bit until he can get a grip on how to actually parent. He got defensive, said I was going too far, but I didn't budge. I'm done playing referee while they both treat my daughter like an inconvenience. He ended up packing a bag and taking his son with him for the night. Not because he thought it was right, more because he wanted to make some kind of statement. And honestly, the silence since they left has felt like the first normal breath I've taken in days. Update 3. My husband came back the next morning, but he came back alone and already annoyed, like somehow me staying calm and enforcing actual consequences made me the unreasonable one. He didn't even sit down, just stood there acting like I had personally ruined the entire season. He kept making these comments about how none of this would have gotten this big if I handled it differently, but wouldn't actually say what differently meant. He tried to imply I escalated everything, even though he's the one who walked out with his kid after creating the entire problem in the first place. He told me his son wanted to stay with his mother because apparently she thinks I'm unbearable now, which isn't shocking since she's been stirring this almost as much as he has. The way he said it annoyed me more because it wasn't concern, it was him trying to make me feel guilty that an 11-year-old chose to stay somewhere else. I didn't give him the reaction he wanted, so he got even more irritated and said I made Christmas miserable for everyone. Meanwhile, my daughter was actually relaxed for the first time all week, which already said everything I needed to know. Then later that afternoon, his sister called me, which I didn't expect at all. She told me her nephew admitted to everything again, and this time he went into detail about why he did it. And apparently he repeated almost word for word things my husband had been saying to him for months. Stuff about how my daughter is always getting attention, how she's always praised for being responsible, how she has it easier than he did. It wasn't even subtle. She also said my husband vents to her sometimes, and she had to be honest with me because it was obvious his son was just parroting whatever he'd been fed. Hearing that from someone else completely unprompted was just the last confirmation I needed that this didn't just come out of nowhere. And I don't even know how to explain it, but something about that just settled everything in my head. All the weird tension suddenly made sense. The way my husband always acted like I was overreacting every time his son did something blatantly out of line. The way he kept saying my daughter was old enough to handle it anytime she felt uncomfortable. It wasn't her imagination at all. She wasn't being dramatic. He was actively contributing to the problem and then acting shocked when his son mirrored it. After that call, I stopped entertaining any kind of equal decision-making with him. I changed the Wi-Fi password, locked down the parental controls again, and put everything back the way it should have been from the start. My daughter finally slept without looking over her shoulder. Christmas Day itself ended up being the first peaceful moment in weeks. My daughter opened her gifts and helped me cook, and everything felt normal for a few hours. My husband stayed around, but he sulked the entire time, acting like he was being punished because nobody immediately forgave him for blowing everything up. He kept saying I was shutting him out, but the reality was he had shut everyone else out long before that. Around lunchtime, he left to go see his son and didn't bother coming back that night. The next morning, I woke up to this long message from him, basically laying out how he felt, and I don't think I've ever read something so indirectly blaming me without outright saying it. He kept talking about not being able to choose between his kids, which made no sense because the only one who needed him to choose was the one actively hurting other people. He said I set his son up to fail, that my daughter was too sensitive, and that he needed space to process everything. I just told him he could take all the space he needed. I didn't bother defending myself because clearly he wasn't interested in hearing it anyway. Final update. Well, who could have guessed I'd divorce him? Sarcasm. The lawyer didn't even look surprised when I explained everything. She immediately told me to start documenting stuff because apparently a grown man undermining consequences for a kid who's already acting out isn't as rare as you'd think. She kept saying, "You've been the only parent in the house for a while," which kind of hit me harder than I expected because once she said it, I couldn't unsee it. Everything from the destroyed gifts to the weird comments to the constant defending of behavior that would have gotten any other kid grounded for months, it all lined up. A few days after I filed, my husband came by saying he needed to grab a few things, which turned into him trying to argue in the doorway about how he didn't think I was serious. He started ranting about me ruining the family, like he hadn't spent months feeding his kid resentments and basically setting him up to behave like this. My daughter heard him and shut herself in her room the second she realized he was raising his voice. That right there was enough for me. I told him he could take what he needed, but I wasn't doing the whole emotional meltdown routine. He eventually left, slamming the door so hard the frame cracked. If anything summed up the whole marriage, it was that. Then his son's mother decided to throw herself into it, saying I was abusive for taking away her kid's devices and not replacing his presents. The moment she said that, I forwarded her the audio clip his sister had sent me, him bragging about destroying the gifts and saying adults would replace everything anyway. I also sent the messages she didn't realize her son had repeated word for word. She went quiet real fast. Suddenly the story changed to, she had no idea he said those things, and he must have been confused. She stopped trying to blame me after that and apparently told my husband she wasn't sending him back over until he figured out whatever mess he made. So now he's dealing with that too. Meanwhile, my daughter started bouncing back almost instantly once all the chaos was gone. She started practicing her violin again, actually sitting in the living room without looking over her shoulder or trying to avoid him. She's been sleeping through the night with no issues. One morning she just said it felt like things were finally normal again, which honestly told me everything I needed to know. It shouldn't take someone moving out for a kid to feel safe in their own home. A couple days later, my husband finally tried having some long emotional moment about how he realized he pushed his kid into thinking everything was a competition. He kept going on about how he didn't mean for any of this to happen, how he let things pile up, how he didn't like that my daughter made parenting look easy because she wasn't constantly acting out. He even admitted that he compared them in his head and tried to balance things by giving his son extra stuff. Basically everything I had been saying for months, but now packaged like some big confession I was supposed to applaud him for. But even after all that, he still tried to say I was too harsh for holding his kid accountable. It was like he finally put the puzzle together and somehow still didn't like the picture enough to just say it was his fault. That right there told me he wasn't actually ready to fix anything. He just didn't like how it blew up. So I told him I wasn't going back. I wasn't risking my daughter's peace again. I wasn't putting myself in a situation where any boundary I set gets undone the second he feels bad for his son. I told him if he wants any kind of co-parenting situation, then he needs therapy and actual parenting classes, because I'm not raising two people at once anymore. He can see his kid wherever he wants, but my daughter isn't going back into a house where she's treated like the problem for existing.